top-dragged black woman from first class, then the airline CEO calls her directly to apologize. Have you ever witnessed a moment so shockingly unjust, it felt like the entire world paused to catch its breath? Picture a crowded airport terminal, the hum of suitcases rolling across glossy floors, the anxious buzz of travelers checking their phones, and one woman standing tall at the center of it all, until a single act of cruelty shatters the illusion of safety. In an instant, she's torn from the comfort of first class by a cop fueled by prejudice. What follows is a whirlwind of revelations, apologies, and an extraordinary twist of fate that proves justice can strike back when you least expect it. Cassandra Rutherford had grown used to second glances. At 32, with her dark skin, statuesque height, and a charismatic presence, she was hardly the type who blended into a crowd. But it wasn't just her looks that made people stare. Cassandra possessed a quiet confidence and a warm smile that marked her as someone worth noticing. Her professional life was a testament to her ambition. She worked as a marketing director for a well-known tech startup, traveling across the country to pitch new ventures and secure crucial investments. At home in Atlanta, she was a beloved daughter to her aging parents, an older sister, and a supportive friend to many. Her schedule was often unforgiving, but Cassandra thrived on the adrenaline of it all. The hustle, the daily grind, the roller coaster rush of an ever-changing career. She loved every second. On a humid summer afternoon, she arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport for yet another business trip. This time, her destination was Seattle, where she had a critical meeting with potential investors for her company. Thanks to her frequent flyer miles, she'd finally earned the upgrade to first class on Delta Airlines, an indulgence she rarely treated herself to, but one she looked forward to immensely. As she strolled through the terminal, her laptop bag at her side, she reveled in this small victory. The flight would be nearly 5 hours long, and she was glad for the extra legroom and a chance to catch up on sleep, or maybe watch a movie. Cassandra was dressed comfortably yet tastefully, black slacks, a crisp white blouse, and a soft lilac cardigan draped over her shoulders for the chilly cabin air. She checked her phone, no new messages from her boss or her parents, then proceeded to the security checkpoint. The lines were fairly typical for a Tuesday afternoon, and she queued up, noticing the varied expressions around her. Tired business people, excited vacationers, and an uneasy older couple fumbling with their IDs. She offered them a reassuring smile as she passed by. Eventually, she arrived at the gate where she spotted her aircraft through the tall glass windows. It was an enormous Boeing 757 in Delta's distinctive livery. The promise of a comfortable seat in first class filled her with anticipation. She considered grabbing a latte from the nearby coffee shop before boarding, but then realized pre-boarding had already begun, and she didn't want to miss the chance to board early and settle in. When her group was called, first class along with passengers needing assistance, Cassandra moved forward. She felt a small flutter of excitement. Traveling in the premium cabin, even for business, had always been something she dreamed of. It felt like a sign of progress in her career, a reward for her hard work. She noticed a few heads turn, people sizing her up, perhaps wondering if she was a celebrity or just a lucky traveler. She offered them a polite nod and made her way down the jet bridge. Inside the aircraft, she was greeted by a friendly flight attendant who pointed her to seat 3A, a window seat near the front. Cassandra smiled and thanked the attendant, sliding her carry-on into the overhead bin before taking her seat. She placed her laptop bag carefully under the seat in front of her. Already, the seat felt plush, the legroom spacious. She snapped a quick photo of her surroundings, celebrating this small milestone, and sent it to her sister with a text that read, "Made it to first class. Let's hope they have the best snacks." As she settled in, the flight attendant offered her a pre-departure beverage. Cassandra opted for water. Her throat was parched from rushing through the terminal. She appreciated the moment's calm, scrolling through her phone to pass the time. A busy week lay ahead, but she felt confident in her pitches and her readiness to impress the Seattle investors. Little did Cassandra know, The flight she hoped would be a peaceful respite would soon become a battleground of prejudice and injustice. The cabin, so serene at that moment, was a mere stage set for a dramatic encounter that would echo far beyond the confines of the plane. As more passengers boarded, she noticed a man in uniform walking down the aisle. It wasn't unusual to see law enforcement traveling, sometimes in an official capacity, sometimes as passengers. She paid it little mind, returning her attention to her phone. The man paused briefly near her row and exchanged words with one of the flight attendants. Cassandra guessed he was a law enforcement officer with a last-minute seat. She didn't know it yet, but this was Officer Bryce Thompson, a seasoned cop from a different state, transferring to Seattle for a specialized training. The tension in the air, though imperceptible, had begun to mount. If Cassandra had known how drastically her day was about to change, she might have braced herself for the turbulence, both literal and metaphorical, that lay ahead. For now, though, Cassandra leaned back and took a sip of her water, blissfully unaware that in a short span of time, she would become the unwilling protagonist of a story that would capture national attention, one where a racist act and corporate crisis would collide, culminating in a series of events that would test her resolve, alter public perception, and ultimately reveal the powerful consequences of justice and empathy. Takeoff approached, and Cassandra set her phone to airplane mode. The pilot welcomed everyone aboard and gave a short announcement about flight duration and expected weather conditions en route to Seattle. Cassandra felt her eyelids grow heavy. She'd slept only 4 hours the night before, busy finalizing her presentation slides. She welcomed the idea of a quiet doze, or perhaps a movie, to lull her into a more relaxed state. Just as the cabin doors were closing, she noticed the uniformed officer, Bryce Thompson, standing in the aisle with a frown on his face. A flight attendant hovered nearby, explaining something in hushed tones. Cassandra tried not to stare, but curiosity got the better of her. The conversation seemed tense, though she couldn't make out the specifics. Eventually, Officer Thompson pointed aggressively toward Cassandra's row. A flush of confusion spread through her. Why was he pointing in her direction? Before she could even process this, the officer marched toward her seat. Her pulse quickened. She'd done nothing wrong. Her ticket was valid. She'd passed through security without issue. Her seat assignment was legitimate. So why was a cop glaring down at her? Officer Thompson spoke first, his voice cutting through the relatively quiet cabin. "Ma'am, you need to move," he said, his tone flat but unmistakably antagonistic. Cassandra blinked. "Excuse me?" she replied, her voice measured but tinged with confusion. "This seat is intended for another passenger," Thompson insisted, ignoring the flight attendant who stood behind him, wringing her hands. "You don't belong here. You're going to have to move back to coach." Cassandra felt her chest tighten. This was absurd. She slowly reached into her handbag, pulled out her ticket and held it up. "Officer, I have a first-class ticket for seat 3A. I've earned this seat," she explained calmly, trying to keep her composure. She glanced at the flight attendant for support, but the attendant looked intimidated by the officer's aggressive demeanor. "I don't care what you think you have," Thompson said, his face growing redder by the second. "I've been told there's an open seat in coach for you, so gather your things and go quietly." By now, other passengers in first class were openly watching, some with phones discreetly out. A ripple of discomfort spread through the cabin. Cassandra felt an urge to stand her ground. She had every right to remain in her seat, but Officer Thompson's posture, broad-shouldered, hand poised near his holster, sent a chilling signal. He was trying to intimidate her. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Please check with the gate agents or the airline staff," she said evenly, trying to reason with him. "I paid for this seat with my miles. I'm not moving unless someone from Delta tells me there's a legitimate issue." What happened next was a blur of confusion and terror. Thompson took a step closer, towering over her, and barked, "Don't resist, ma'am. I'm giving you a lawful order." He reached down without warning, grabbed her by the arm, and began yanking her out of the seat. Cassandra instinctively gasped, pain shooting up her shoulder as she tried to wrench free. She heard the flight attendant protest, "Officer, please, this is not the seat you were assigned, she's the ticketed passenger." But the officer ignored the flight attendant. Cassandra tried to voice a protest, but she was stunned by the physical assault. She clung to the armrest, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't do this," she yelled, her voice cracking with panic. "I have every right to sit here." Thompson, fueled by some twisted sense of authority, pulled harder. Cassandra stumbled into the aisle, nearly tripping over her laptop bag. A chorus of horrified gasps erupted from onlookers. Phones snapped up in unison, capturing every moment. The flight attendant was pleading now. "Officer, stop! She's not in the wrong seat." Thompson ignored the pleas. Perhaps it was prejudice, or perhaps some malignant power trip, but his contempt was clear. "What's your name?" Cassandra demanded, tears stinging her eyes as she tried to steady herself. "I'm going to report this abuse." He shot her a cold glare. "Thompson, Officer Thompson." Then he tightened his grip, half dragging, half pushing Cassandra toward the front galley. By now, flight attendants were rushing forward, shouting objections, but Thompson bullied past them. "I'll escort her off the plane," he announced as if he were making an arrest. "You can't do that, officer," cried another attendant, looking around helplessly for a higher authority. The pilot had yet to exit the cockpit, and the chaos escalated in the narrow confines of the plane's entrance area. Cassandra struggled, her cardigan slipping from her shoulder, her hair falling loose. Her mind raced with confusion and fear. Why was this happening? She'd done absolutely nothing wrong. This was cruelty, an overt act of racism. There was no other explanation for it. His eyes burned with an unspoken message. "You don't belong here." In a last-ditch effort to stand up for herself, Cassandra shouted, "Someone call the gate agent. Let them confirm my ticket. I'm not leaving this plane. I won't be humiliated and mistreated because of this man's prejudice." Her words rang through the plane, resonating with more than a few fellow passengers. A couple stood up, trying to intervene verbally. Others remained rooted in their seats, uncertain how to help without risking their own safety. Then, an older woman in business attire stepped into the aisle, demanding that Thompson present his badge number and justification for forcibly removing a passenger who had every right to be there. Thompson refused to engage. Instead, he shoved Cassandra forward, causing her to collide with the bulkhead wall. A wave of fury and despair surged through her. She felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation, the helplessness. Her phone was still in her seat pocket, her personal belongings strewn about. She couldn't film this injustice, but others were certainly capturing every second. By the time she was wrestled off the aircraft and into the jet bridge, Cassandra felt dizzy, her arm throbbing where Thompson had gripped it. The flight attendants followed in a panicked cluster, one of them exclaiming, "Officer, this is a serious misunderstanding. She's in the correct seat." Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the gate agent arrived, breathless and wide-eyed. She looked at Thompson in disbelief. "Officer, you need to let her go," the agent insisted. "She does have a first-class ticket. She's our medallion member. You have no authority to remove her from this flight." Cassandra thought she heard Thompson mutter something under his breath, possibly cursing. He let go of her arm, leaving her panting against the cold metal walls of the jet bridge. The gate agent immediately crouched next to Cassandra, asking if she was okay. Cassandra could only manage a nod, still too stunned to speak. The flight attendants began peppering Thompson with questions while he scowled, arms crossed over his chest. "She wouldn't comply," he said stiffly, as if that alone justified his violent outburst. Passengers were peering from the airplane door, some capturing footage, some simply too shocked to do anything else. It took another 10 minutes before the airline's supervisors arrived, smoothing the situation with measured voices and sympathetic glances. They ushered Thompson aside, conferring with him out of earshot. The gate agent helped Cassandra up, guiding her to a seat in the waiting area. She felt hollow, her mind racing to catch up with what had just occurred. An older attendant brought her a glass of water, and Cassandra accepted it with trembling hands. She could hear raised voices from the side, airline supervisors telling Thompson that he had no authority to forcibly remove a ticketed passenger, especially in such a brutal manner. He offered a half-hearted apology, which satisfied no one. By then, the entire plane's departure was delayed, and a swirl of rumors crackled through the gate area. Some travelers whispered to each other, "They dragged her off the plane. Did you see that?" Others were on their phones describing the event to family or friends. Social media posts had already begun circulating. The seeds of a viral controversy had been planted. Cassandra found her voice again, turning to the gate agent. "I want to speak to whoever is in charge," she said firmly. "This is unacceptable. He assaulted me." The gate agent nodded, tight-lipped but empathetic. "Absolutely, Miss Rutherford. We'll make sure your complaint is registered. We'll make sure you get the right support." Despite the chaos, Cassandra felt a small flicker of resolve ignite within her. She wasn't going to be brushed aside. She wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug. Whatever came next, lawsuits, public outcry, personal ramifications, she would fight for her dignity. She deserved that seat, that respect as much as any other human being. Little did she know that the events unfolding here in the jet bridge were merely the opening salvo. In the hours and days to come, her name would be thrust into the national spotlight. People around the world would see the video, stand in solidarity with her, or question how such injustice could still happen. And as for Officer Thompson, his day of reckoning would arrive sooner than he ever imagined, in a way that would make him regret every moment he'd spent asserting his hate-fueled authority. In the aftermath of the assault, Cassandra found herself sitting in the terminal, surrounded by Delta's supervisory staff, concerned passengers, and a trio of airport security officers. Her arm still throbbed where Thompson had grabbed her, but the emotional pain was far more intense. The humiliation of being dragged off a flight she had every right to be on echoed in her mind, replaying in brutal detail. A sympathetic supervisor, whose name tag read Elena, knelt in front of Cassandra. "Miss Rutherford, is there anything we can do for you right now?" she asked softly. "We have medical personnel on standby if you want to be examined for injuries, and I'll personally help you reboard the flight if you feel comfortable doing so." Cassandra appreciated Elena's concern, but she was still in shock. I'm not sure," she mumbled, pressing her free hand to her forehead. "I think I want to talk to the police, real police, not an off-duty officer on a power trip." "You have every right to file an official complaint," Elena reassured her. "We're going to support you. We have all the information needed to confirm you were in the correct seat, plus multiple witnesses and videos. I'm sorry this happened." In that moment, Cassandra's phone buzzed, her sister calling, probably in response to the earlier photo. She let it go to voicemail, unable to muster the energy to explain the harrowing ordeal. She was certain the videos would soon be circulating on social media. In fact, a quick glance at Twitter confirmed it. Her name was already trending locally, with eyewitness accounts describing the horrifying scene. Reports mentioned an unnamed black woman forced off a Delta flight by a racist off-duty cop. The hashtags began sprouting. #FlyingWhileBlack, #JusticeForCassandra. Emotional commentary flooded in, supporting her without even knowing her full name. The internet was rallying behind her in real time. Cassandra finally answered her sister's second call, relating the incident in a trembling voice. On the other end, her sister was distraught, outraged, and insisted she not board the same flight again for her own safety. "We'll hire a lawyer, Cass," her sister vowed. "You're not letting them get away with this." Meanwhile, the airline was scrambling to manage the PR crisis. Someone from Delta's corporate office was on the phone with the supervisors at the gate, trying to piece together the chain of events. A few local news outlets already had reporters en route, tipped off by social media mentions and passenger phone calls. Cassandra decided to see a medic. The paramedics who arrived were gentle, confirming that her shoulder was sprained, though not severely. She received an ice pack and a recommendation to take it easy. The paramedics also insisted on filing an official incident report, which Cassandra welcomed. The presence of more documentation made her feel less helpless. While she was being examined, a pair of uniformed airport police officers arrived. Actual airport authority officers, not affiliated with the city police. They were calm, professional, and they asked Cassandra for her statement. She recounted the entire incident, her voice quaking with the lingering shock. They took note of the flight attendants and passengers who had witnessed the assault, as well as their contact details. Then came the question that chilled her. "Do you want to press charges against Officer Bryce Thompson?" Cassandra froze for a moment, aware that pressing charges would unleash a larger battle, but she also knew that letting it go would be tantamount to approving such egregious behavior. Finally, she exhaled, determination flickering in her eyes. "Yes," she said quietly, "I do." In the background, she heard a supervisor speaking in urgent tones to someone on the phone. "We have to get her on another flight to Seattle today. No, we can't let her be stranded." "Yes, I understand. The media is already—" Cassandra wasn't sure if she even wanted to fly anymore. The thought of being in a confined space again, in the shadow of the trauma she'd just endured, felt suffocating. But she had an important business meeting the next morning. Was there any way she could salvage this trip? A swirl of emotion, anger, shame, resolve, left her reeling. The next hour became a blur of statements and paperwork. She explained her side of the story to the airline staff and the airport police multiple times. Thompson was nowhere to be seen, presumably escorted to a private area for questioning. She hoped he was being detained for his actions, but she wasn't sure how the internal processes worked. While this was happening, social media was ablaze with the story. Video clips emerged, each from a slightly different angle. Cassandra being yanked out of her seat, Thompson's hand clamped on her arm, the flight attendants pleading with him to stop. The angles captured the shock on Cassandra's face, the horror in the eyes of the other passengers. A wave of public outrage crashed over the internet. High-profile activists, journalists, and politicians retweeted the footage demanding accountability. Amid the chaos, Elena, still by Cassandra's side, gently asked if she wanted to speak to someone from Delta's corporate communications team. The airline was prepared to issue a public statement. Cassandra hesitated, uncertain whether she trusted them or if it was too soon. Ultimately, she decided to wait until she had legal representation. The last thing she wanted was to be manipulated by a carefully orchestrated corporate PR strategy. After discussing with her sister via phone, Cassandra agreed to board another flight. Delta staff assured her they'd place her again in first class, that she would receive a complimentary upgrade, as well as compensation for the ordeal. Reluctantly, she accepted. She needed to get to Seattle, and if the flight staff and airport police could guarantee Thompson wouldn't be on that plane, it would at least allow her to carry on with her plans. But her heart hammered at the mere thought of stepping onto another aircraft. As she waited in the airport lounge, ice pack on her shoulder, the world beyond that terminal spun faster by the minute. Hashtags soared. Cable news channels picked up the story, playing the grainy cell phone footage. Pundits dissected the incident, some seeing it as an all-too-common example of systemic racism. Others questioned whether there was more to the story. But the video evidence left little room for doubt. The officer's actions were unprovoked and brutal. An older gentleman in a well-tailored suit approached Cassandra quietly. "I'm one of the attorneys working with Delta," he said, offering a polite bow of introduction. "I just wanted to personally say that we do not condone what happened. We are investigating. We do believe you, Miss Rutherford, and please know our leadership is aware of this." She nodded, too emotionally exhausted to form a reply. She thanked him politely but resolved not to offer any statements or sign any documents until she had her own lawyer. Her phone kept buzzing with calls and texts, friends who saw the footage, colleagues who recognized her from the partial glimpses in the videos, old acquaintances from college who wanted to show support. She responded to only a few, feeling overwhelmed. Hours later, she finally boarded a new flight, flanked by airline staff who personally escorted her to her seat. The flight attendants apologized profusely, some even tearing up as they recounted how powerless they felt against Thompson's brutality. Cassandra tried to put on a brave face, but her heart pounded at every uniform she saw. She knew she would forever be on edge while traveling. She settled into her seat, 1A, a courtesy from the airline, and numbly watched as other passengers boarded. Every time someone in a uniform passed by, her muscles tensed. She clutched the armrest, forcing herself to breathe. "You will not let him break you," she thought, repeating it like a mantra. Once the plane was in the air, she managed to doze lightly. Her dreams were fractured scenes of the day's horror, a forceful hand seizing her arm, the cold press of the jet bridge wall on her back. She woke with a small cry, startling the passenger next to her. Apologizing, she turned to the window, watching the clouds roll by. By the time she landed in Seattle, the sun had already set, and her phone buzzed non-stop with notifications. National coverage on CNN, MSNBC, and countless online outlets. Extended commentary on the racial dynamics of law enforcement. A press release from a Seattle-based civil rights group calling for Thompson's immediate suspension and an independent investigation. Even Delta's official statement had gone live, condemning the incident, promising full cooperation with authorities, and offering personal apologies to Miss CR for what they termed an egregious and unacceptable violation of her rights. Exhausted, Cassandra stepped off the plane and headed for baggage claim, ignoring the small cluster of reporters waiting near the exit gates. She just wanted to reach her hotel, ice her shoulder, and prepare for her meeting. But the world was pressing in. Colleagues texted her, "Should we cancel tomorrow? This is insane." She almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. That morning she was simply traveling for business. By evening her life had been irrevocably changed. As she climbed into a taxi, she stared at her reflection in the window. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes ringed with fatigue, yet something in her expression was stronger, more resolute. She realized she had become a symbol for something much bigger than herself, a cause, a movement. If her ordeal could shine a light on the deep systemic issues still plaguing society, perhaps some good could come of this nightmare. Little did she know that the next phone call, the one that would ring through the quiet of her hotel room, would come from the highest echelon of Delta Airlines itself, and it would change the trajectory of events once again, propelling Cassandra into a position she never asked for, that of a reluctant but determined catalyst for justice. Cassandra's arrival at the Seattle hotel was a blur of exhaustion. She checked in, accepted her room key from a sympathetic receptionist who clearly recognized her from the viral coverage, and lugged her carry-on upstairs. The short elevator ride felt eternal as she closed her eyes, leaning against the wall. Inside the room, she finally let out the breath she'd been holding since her second flight departed Atlanta. She flicked on a lamp, took off her shoes, and sank onto the edge of the plush bed. Her shoulder ached, so she applied the ice pack again, scrolling through the barrage of messages on her phone. Her boss had sent numerous messages of concern, offering to reschedule the investor meeting if she wasn't up to it. Cassandra typed back that she would still attend. Her sense of duty and pride wouldn't let her cower from a professional obligation, even in the wake of this public nightmare. Then, a string of unknown numbers filled her notification center. Journalists, activists, attorneys. Her personal email had hundreds of new messages. She scrolled past them, not ready to engage. She only paused at one subject line. From the office of Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines. Request for a call. Cassandra's pulse skipped. She tapped the email open. It was short and formal, requesting her availability for a direct phone call from Mr. Bastian at her earliest convenience. A direct call from the CEO himself. If she wasn't so emotionally spent, she might have laughed at the irony. 24 hours ago, she was just another passenger boarding a flight. Now, she was at the center of a storm that even the chief executive of Delta wanted to calm. She decided to respond, albeit briefly. I am available to speak tomorrow morning after 8 a.m. PT. Thank you. She pressed send, uncertain if she was doing the right thing, but feeling it was best to hear them out. Just as she was about to turn off her phone, another notification flashed. A local Atlanta station had uncovered background information on Officer Bryce Thompson. With a morbid curiosity, Cassandra clicked the link. A news anchor's voice filled the screen. The officer involved in forcibly removing a passenger from a Delta flight earlier today has been identified as Bryce Thompson, a 15-year veteran of the East Haven Police Department in Alabama. Sources indicate that Thompson has been the subject of multiple internal investigations related to excessive force and racial bias allegations. In 2017, he was briefly suspended for using excessive force during a traffic stop. In 2019, a civil suit alleged racially motivated misconduct, but was settled out of court. The East Haven Police Department has not yet released a statement regarding the incident. Cassandra's heart pounded. Multiple investigations, suspensions. Her blood boiled at the knowledge that this man, who had already proven himself unfit for duty, had somehow continued serving, his record seemingly washed clean each time. And now she was his latest victim. A surge of anger welled up in her. This was no isolated event. Thompson was a serial abuser of power, shielded by a flawed system. The entire fiasco might have been prevented if earlier reports of his misconduct had been taken seriously. Cassandra felt a rush of determination. She would ensure that this time, he wouldn't escape accountability. She placed her phone on silent mode, changed into her pajamas, and climbed into bed. Sleep came in fits with nightmares of Thompson's hulking figure yanking her from the seat and the searing stares of onlookers. Each time she awoke, the memory stabbed at her like a fresh wound. Morning dawned in a pale gray across the Seattle skyline, the city's iconic drizzle tapping softly on the windows. Cassandra forced herself up, showered, and reviewed her notes for the investor meeting. She had to compartmentalize, focus on the task at hand, even though her personal life was in utter upheaval. She rummaged through her suitcase for a professional dress, opting for a navy blue ensemble that projected confidence, if only on the outside. Over a light breakfast of toast and coffee, she steeled herself for the upcoming phone call with Ed Bastian. At precisely 8:15 a.m., her phone rang from a number labeled blocked. She swallowed the knot of anxiety, then answered. "Miss Rutherford, good morning. This is Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines," came a calm, measured voice. "Thank you for taking my call. First of all, let me say how deeply sorry I am for the incident you experienced. Delta has zero tolerance for discrimination or violence against our customers." Cassandra exhaled. She had expected a polished, practiced tone, and that's exactly what she got. "Thank you for calling, Mr. Bastian," she said, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "I'm sure you understand that I'm still extremely upset and considering my legal options." "Absolutely," he replied without hesitation. "And I respect your decisions fully. I want you to know that Delta's official stance is that you were unjustly treated. We're conducting an internal investigation and cooperating with local authorities. The flight attendant's statements and the overwhelming video evidence speak for themselves. Officer Thompson had no standing to remove you from your seat." Cassandra's jaw tensed at the mention of Thompson's name. "I appreciate the airline's support, but I can't emphasize enough that this incident has changed my life. I have a shoulder injury, and I've suffered immense humiliation, not to mention the emotional trauma. Words alone won't fix that." "I understand," Bastian acknowledged. "I'd like to offer on behalf of Delta full coverage of any medical expenses you might incur. We'd also like to compensate you for your pain and suffering in a tangible way, beyond an apology. I know this doesn't erase what happened, but I hope it can be a step toward restitution." Cassandra swallowed hard, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. "I'm not looking to just be bought off, Mr. Bastian. I want real accountability. This man has a history of using force disproportionately, and it's horrifying that he was able to target me like this." "We share your concern," Bastian said solemnly. "We're working with the authorities in Atlanta, and we're urging them to proceed with whatever charges or investigations are necessary. Thompson has been barred from all Delta flights in the future, effective immediately. I know that doesn't make up for your ordeal, but I hope it offers some relief. We're also revisiting our protocols about how off-duty law enforcement is handled on flights to ensure this never happens again. A fleeting satisfaction flitted through Cassandra. The idea that Thompson was blacklisted from Delta was a small but meaningful victory. "What about your flight crew?" she asked. "Some of them tried to help me. Some were silent. I'm curious about how they're being supported or retrained in the event something like this happens again." "We're providing counseling and additional training on how to handle escalated situations, especially regarding conflicts with law enforcement on board," Bastian replied. "Believe me, Miss Rutherford, the flight attendants who witnessed what happened are quite shaken. They felt powerless and we're addressing that." There was a pause on the line. Cassandra guessed he was gathering his final thoughts. "Lastly," he said softly, "I want you to know that if you need any additional support, legal resources, counseling, or otherwise, Delta is prepared to assist. We want to stand with you during this process. If at any point you wish to speak publicly alongside Delta about this incident, we will respect your narrative and ensure your voice is front and center." Cassandra hesitated, remembering her sister's advice, not to trust corporate overtures blindly. But something in Bastian's tone suggested genuine remorse. Perhaps the airline had no choice but to go into damage control mode, but she sensed he was personally shaken. "I appreciate your call," she told him. "But yes, I'll be making decisions after consulting with my own legal team. Right now, I need to focus on my work. I have a meeting in a few hours." "I completely understand," he said. "If you need anything, please reach out. Thank you again for taking my call and good luck with your meeting." With that, the call ended, leaving Cassandra feeling oddly conflicted. On one hand, hearing a personal apology and an offer of restitution from the CEO of a major airline felt validating. On the other, it didn't erase the trauma or the deeper societal issue at play. How many more officers like Thompson were out there, unchecked, ready to victimize people of color? She brushed aside these thoughts for the moment, finishing her coffee. Her investor meeting loomed, and she needed to keep her professional composure. Still, as she closed her laptop and gathered her materials, she couldn't help but reflect on the surreal twists in her life. Within 24 hours, she'd gone from an eager business traveler to a symbol of racial injustice, receiving a direct call from Delta's CEO. Little did she know, the next stage of the saga would unfold back in Atlanta and beyond. Investigations into Officer Thompson's past would peel away layer after layer of corruption in his department, igniting a media frenzy. And as for Cassandra, she would soon be at the epicenter of a legal and cultural storm, forced to speak not only for herself, but for countless others who had endured similar indignities with no recourse. The karmic wheel was turning, and soon enough, it would spin with consequences that no one, least of all Bryce Thompson, could have anticipated. Despite the ache in her shoulder, Cassandra gave a stellar presentation to the Seattle investors. Adrenaline and determination fueled her performance, and while she tried to ignore the swirling drama in her personal life, she sensed the curious stares from those who'd recognized her name. Word traveled fast in the corporate world. People were already whispering about that viral plane incident. Once the meeting adjourned, she retreated to her hotel. She had a flurry of calls to return. Her newly hired attorney, recommended by a family friend, wanted to discuss next steps. Also, the media requests were piling up. A major national television network had extended an invitation for a live interview. Several prominent podcasts and online platforms wanted her perspective. Civil rights organizations reached out, inviting her to speak at events or rallies. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Cassandra closed the hotel curtains, sank onto the couch, and dialed her new attorney. He introduced himself as Samuel Hayes, a calm, methodical professional with experience in civil rights cases. "Cassandra," he said warmly, "first, I'm sorry you went through such a traumatic event. I've reviewed the footage, and it's pretty damning for Thompson. We're dealing with a clear case of assault in violation of your rights. We have grounds for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit." She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "So I'm not crazy for wanting accountability?" "Not at all," he assured her. "In fact, based on his record, I believe there's a larger pattern of abuse we can bring to light. This could become a precedent-setting case. I also see that Delta has expressed support. That's a good sign for us, but we should be cautious with any settlement offers or public statements. They'll want to protect themselves legally, too." Cassandra nodded, pacing the small hotel living room. "I also got a call from Ed Bastian, the CEO. He apologized personally. Which is excellent for you, but keep in mind, from a legal standpoint, we'll want to formalize any agreements. Don't sign anything or make any final statements without consulting me." "Understood," she replied, rubbing her temples. It was surreal to think her life had spiraled into such complexity in less than a day. After they hung up, Cassandra took a moment to check the latest headlines. One local Atlanta station had obtained documents alleging that Thompson's own police department had dismissed a prior racial discrimination case due to lack of evidence, despite witness testimony. Another article detailed that certain city officials might have protected Thompson. The story was exploding, a tapestry of alleged corruption weaving itself around the officer's career. That night, the major networks ran segments on the Delta assault. Clips of Cassandra's removal played repeatedly, accompanied by commentary from legal analysts, civil rights leaders, and retired law enforcement officials. Some praised Cassandra's courage for pressing charges, while others condemned Thompson's actions as a frightening display of racism. A few contrarians tried to stoke controversy by suggesting, "We haven't heard his side." But the videos were so unequivocal that such arguments found little traction. As the media frenzy grew, Cassandra's phone lit up with calls from other victims of Thompson's brutality. A young man recounted how, 2 years prior, Thompson had pulled him over for a broken tail light and ended up slamming him onto the hood of his patrol car. A woman tearfully described an incident in which Thompson had threatened her with arrest if she didn't vacate a public park after hours. Each testimony painted a picture of a man who delighted in using his badge as a weapon against people of color. Cassandra was shaken by how many stories mirrored her own experience of sudden, unprovoked aggression. Her attorney advised her to collect these testimonies as they might strengthen the case against Thompson. She agreed, though she could hardly bear to read them without feeling ill. Meanwhile, back at home in Atlanta, Cassandra's parents and sister were bombarded by local reporters seeking interviews. Her sister, a no-nonsense woman with a fierce protective streak, gave a measured statement condemning the officer's actions and demanding full accountability. "We won't rest until justice is served," she told the cameras, her eyes brimming with righteous anger. By the time Cassandra's flight touched down in Atlanta, the airport was swarming with reporters. She'd hoped to slip through quietly, but there was little chance of that. Camera crews waited at the baggage claim, and a tide of questions surged when she appeared. "Miss Rutherford, do you plan to sue?" "Have you spoken with Officer Thompson? Are you pressing charges? How do you feel about the police department's statement?" Cassandra stood tall, though her heart pounded. She carefully repeated her prepared line. "Thank you for your concern. My attorney is handling all inquiries, and I will have a statement in due time." She didn't linger, swiftly navigating past the throng with the help of airport security who'd been alerted to her arrival. Her sister waited by the exit, ready with a tight hug. "You okay?" she asked gently, eyes searching Cassandra's face. "As okay as I can be," Cassandra replied, forcing a small smile. "Just exhausted." When they reached home, Cassandra felt a wave of relief wash over her. The familiar scents of her parents' cooking, the cozy living room sofa, the framed family photos, everything offered a sense of normalcy in a life suddenly catapulted into chaos. Her parents fussed over her bruised shoulder, insisting she rest. That evening, as the family gathered around the TV, a breaking news segment flashed. Officer Thompson arrested on charges of assault and battery. Cassandra's mother nearly dropped the pot she was carrying. They all stared at the screen, stunned, as the anchor explained that the East Haven Police Department, under mounting public pressure, had expedited an internal probe. Combined with the Atlanta Airport Police's own investigations and statements from multiple witnesses, they had enough cause to arrest Thompson on assault charges. "We can confirm that Officer Bryce Thompson was taken into custody earlier today," the anchor said. "He faces potential felony charges given his history and evidence of repeated misconduct. This is a major development in what has become a national conversation about police brutality and racial bias." Cassandra covered her mouth, her eyes burning with tears of relief. She hadn't expected the wheels of justice to turn so quickly. Her sister let out a whoop of joy. Her parents, though subdued, exchanged grateful looks. It didn't erase the trauma, but it was a start. Over the next few days, the revelations came in waves. Thompson's departmental records were leaked to the press, showcasing a history of complaints that had been swept under the rug. Whispers emerged of corruption within the East Haven force. Some higher-ups had allegedly helped conceal evidence of Thompson's past misconduct. Investigations widened, roping in top officials. Local politicians distanced themselves from the department, vowing to clean house. The public's appetite for answers only grew. Cassandra, meanwhile, found her mailbox full of letters from well-wishers, some from as far away as Europe and Asia, sharing their own experiences or simply offering support. Gifts arrived: a teddy bear from a women's advocacy group, fruit baskets from a coalition of black business owners, heartfelt cards from school children. It was overwhelming, but also deeply affirming. In a world rife with injustice, there was still compassion. Through all this, she remained in close contact with her attorney, who meticulously prepared both the criminal case, as a cooperating witness, and the civil lawsuit against Thompson, the East Haven Police Department, and possibly the city itself. Delta Airline's legal team reached out multiple times, offering settlements to cover her expenses and additional compensation. But Cassandra held firm, not wanting to sign any non-disclosure agreements that might silence her. She was determined to use her voice, to testify openly about what had happened. And then, in an unexpected twist, Cassandra received a phone call from an old friend of Thompson's ex-wife. The woman, who identified herself as Karen Morrison, claimed she had documents proving Thompson's pattern of domestic abuse and evidence that the department shielded him. With her attorney's advice, Cassandra arranged to meet Morrison at a neutral location, hoping to obtain these documents. The meeting took place at a small cafe on the outskirts of Atlanta. Morrison arrived, a petite woman with tired eyes, clutching a manila folder like it was her shield against the world. She recognized Cassandra immediately. "I'm so sorry for what he did to you," she said softly, looking down. "I tried to warn people for years." Cassandra reached across the table, offering a reassuring squeeze. "Thank you for coming forward. What you have could be very important." Morrison carefully opened the folder, revealing printouts of emails, text conversations, and even a few audio recordings. Each piece added another layer to Thompson's chilling behavior. Threats of violence, racially charged language, admissions that he had friends in high places who'd protect him. Cassandra's stomach churned as she read the vile content. "This is horrifying," she whispered, "but it helps prove a pattern. Thank you. You're brave for sharing this." Morrison's eyes welled with tears. "He was a monster. My friend, his ex-wife, tried to fight back, but the department shut her down. She had no support. And I never knew how to help, but seeing him drag you on that plane like that, I couldn't stay silent anymore." Cassandra nodded, empathy flooding her. "We'll use this to make sure he faces full accountability, I promise." That very afternoon, she handed the evidence to her attorney, who incorporated it into their case. The media quickly caught wind of the damning documents, fueling an even broader outcry. Civil rights groups called for a federal investigation into Thompson and his department. The story was no longer just about Cassandra. It had become a catalyst for exposing systemic injustice in East Haven and beyond. Through it all, Officer Thompson languished in custody, There were rumors that he was put in solitary confinement for his own protection, as some inmates recognized him from prior arrests. The irony wasn't lost on the public or the media. A man who had so blatantly abused his power was now subject to the same system he once controlled. And the karmic twists didn't stop there. The mayor of East Haven, who had publicly dismissed earlier complaints against Thompson, was soon embroiled in a separate scandal involving misuse of funds. The police chief, facing immense scrutiny, resigned abruptly, citing health reasons. Investigative journalists followed the money and discovered disturbing ties between the department's union and local politicians. One by one, the dominoes fell, revealing a network of corruption that had allowed individuals like Thompson to thrive unchecked. Cassandra, meanwhile, found herself thrust into a role she never sought, that of an advocate, a symbol of resistance, and a voice for the voiceless. She was invited to speak on panels discussing police reform, to attend rallies aimed at strengthening oversight and accountability. Though public speaking was never her forte, she rose to the occasion, her personal story lending a human face to policy discussions. Privately, she struggled with nightmares and anxiety, her therapist helping her navigate the trauma. The memory of being violently dragged from her seat still haunted her, but with each passing day she felt a growing sense of purpose. The outpouring of support and her newfound platform gave her strength. She recognized that the fight wasn't just about punishing Thompson. It was about preventing future Thompsons from ever taking root. Months of legal wrangling and depositions paved the way for the trial of Officer Bryce Thompson. The courthouse in Atlanta became the epicenter of a massive media presence. News vans lined the streets, cameras perched at every corner, and activists held signs demanding justice. Each morning as Cassandra arrived with her attorney, a hush seemed to fall over the crowd, followed by the soft murmur of reporters narrating the spectacle to their live feeds. Inside the courtroom, Thompson sat at the defense table looking gaunt and sullen. No longer wearing a badge or uniform, he wore a standard-issue suit, his hair disheveled, eyes darting nervously. Cassandra watched him from across the aisle, feeling a mix of fear and triumph. She remembered too well the ferocity in his gaze when he'd seized her arm on that plane. Now that same bravado was gone. The prosecution laid out a damning case, calling multiple witnesses. Flight attendants testified about Thompson's unprovoked aggression. Passengers shared first-hand accounts of Cassandra's violent removal. Videos played on a large monitor, capturing the exact moment he'd dragged her from her seat, ignoring pleas to stop. Each image was a punch to the gut, forcing Cassandra to relive that terrifying day. But she kept her composure, bolstered by the knowledge that truth was on her side. When it came time for the defense to cross-examine her, they attempted to cast doubt. "Did you say anything to provoke Officer Thompson? Had you argued about the seat? Could there have been a misunderstanding?" But the video and the flight attendants' testimonies left little room for such narratives. Cassandra answered calmly, reiterating that she'd shown her ticket and told him to check with airline staff. She had done nothing to provoke such brutality. The defense also tried to claim Thompson believed he was following standard protocol, but the prosecutor dismantled this argument by introducing evidence of Thompson's text messages, the vile language he used when talking about people of color, his references to using extra force when dealing with certain passengers. By the time the prosecution rested, the narrative was clear. Thompson had acted with bias and brutality, with no legitimate justification. Closing arguments painted a stark portrait of a man who had repeatedly abused his power, and felt emboldened to do so again. The defense, left with few straws to grasp, tried to stir sympathy for Thompson's stressful career and lack of proper training. It fell flat. The jury looked on impassively, many having witnessed the shocking footage multiple times during the trial. Sympathy for the former officer was hard to come by. After deliberations that lasted less than a day, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on all major counts, including aggravated assault and battery. A wave of relief coursed through the courtroom. Thompson's face paled, his shoulders sagging as the reality of prison time bore down. Cassandra squeezed her attorney's hand, blinking back tears of vindication. In the wake of the verdict, the judge handed down a prison sentence of 6 years, with the possibility of parole after 4. Some activists criticized the sentence as too lenient, but for Cassandra, it was a tangible acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It meant the system, at least this time, had not turned a blind eye. That evening, Delta Airlines released a statement praising the verdict and acknowledging Cassandra's courage. Ed Bastian personally called her again, reiterating the airline's commitment to improving policies and offering further compensation. This time, Cassandra's attorney negotiated a settlement that would cover her medical expenses, provide a significant financial award, and not restrict her from speaking about her experience publicly. When the dust settled, Cassandra found herself with an unexpected platform. Civil rights organizations invited her to speak at conferences, while non-profits sought her voice to advocate for improved law enforcement training. Though her initial dream had been to keep climbing the corporate ladder in marketing, she realized she had a higher calling now. She began splitting her time between her job and activism, using her story to push for reforms in airline protocols and policing standards. And as word of Thompson's conviction spread, more victims of police brutality came forward in other jurisdictions, emboldened by Cassandra's victory. Some found justice, others faced uphill battles. But in every instance, Cassandra's story stood as a testament that change was indeed possible, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. In the quiet of her own thoughts, Cassandra often reflected on the swift arc of events, how one simple flight, meant to be a routine business trip, had sparked a conflagration of accountability that toppled a corrupt system and brought a hardened bigot to justice. She didn't believe in perfect closure or a world free from discrimination, but she believed in the power of shared voices and collective outrage. Thank you for joining me in this deeply emotional journey, where one woman's courage forced an entire system to confront its own failings. We saw how a seemingly routine flight could spiral into a heart-stopping ordeal, and how the power of collective outrage, coupled with steadfast determination, can make real change happen. From the initial shock of being assaulted to the CEO's personal apology and the subsequent wave of reforms, Cassandra's story reminds us that we can't stay silent in the face of injustice. If her triumph over adversity inspired you, please hit that like button, share this video with friends and family, and most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss future stories highlighting bravery and resilience. Together we can keep the conversation alive and champion justice for all. Your voice matters. Thank you for being a part of this journey.